Hello, this is Algebra 2, Lesson 71, and this lesson covers the quadratic formula. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to build the quadratic formula. And we're going to use letters to represent our variables. So generally a quadratic equation would have something like 2x squared plus 4x minus 3 equals 0. So whatever our coefficient of x squared, we're going to make that be a, and our coefficient of x, we're going to make that be b, and then the one of the coefficient of x0, or the term that doesn't have an x, that'll be c. All right, and we're going to rearrange this equation so that we get a general equation on how to solve quadratics. All right, so the first thing we need to do is divide by a. To get rid of this a, we want to isolate x. All right, so we get x squared plus bx over a plus c over a equals 0. Now, generally when we solve an equation by completing the square, we're going to move this term to the other side. So the one that doesn't have an x gets moved to the other side of the equation. So we get x squared plus bx over a equals negative c over a. So when we do that, then we're going to take this middle term and we're going to divide it by 2. And then we're going to square it. So our middle term is, actually it's not bx over a. I'm going to leave that x. It's bax. So the coefficient of x in the middle gets squared, or gets divided by 2 and then squared. So b over a times 1/2. And then we're going to square that, right? So b over a times 1/2 would be b over 2a, and then we're going to square that. So times b over 2a again, b squared over 2 times 2 is 4, a squared. And then we're going to add that to both sides. So we're going to add it right here. B squared over 4a squared, and we're going to add it right here. So that's just what we do when we do completing the square, except we're just doing it with variables, letters, to represent what our coefficients would be. So we've got b over a x plus b squared over 4a squared equals b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. All right, the next thing we need to do, we write the term in parentheses as a squared term. So that would be, if we had x squared and we're trying to get this, so that means that we're going to use this one, right? So x plus b over 2a squared. So if I said b over 2a plus b over 2a, I would get let's see, I would get, that would be b divided by 2 times a. Yep, I would get this middle term, okay? And if I squared it, then I would get this third term. All right, so that equals b squared minus 4 ac over 4a squared So I just put these together, right? So if I've got b squared over 4a squared and I want to add them, right, I need to multiply this by and multiply this by 4a squared. And those cancel. So I'll just have b squared over 4a squared minus, then I multiply that right there. So I've already got one of those a's, so I'd have 4c AC over 4a squared. All right, so that just kind of put those two terms together there. Okay, so let me rewrite this up here. So far we've got x minus b over 2a squared equals b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. All right, so then I'm going to pull the square root of that. So if I square root that and I square root that. All right, so this would be x minus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over, I can get the square root of that, that would be 2a. Alright, now I just have to move this b over 2a to the other side. Oops, that's supposed to be a plus. So that means this one would be a minus. So minus b over 2a. So x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And that is what's called the quadratic formula. If you can memorize that, that would be good. There's some YouTube videos that make it into a song, or you can just look back in here in the book. So when it asks you to solve equations using the quadratic formula, that's what you're going to be using. Alright, so next problem asks us to use the quadratic formula to find the roots of the equation. Alright, so this one it's already arranged if we've got squared and then x and then no x. So a is going to be whatever the coefficient of x is. Remember, because it's a x squared plus b x plus c equals 0. So that's our base there. So a is going to be 3. B is going to be negative 2. And c is going to be 5. So first I'm going to write the quadratic formula. I'm going to get a different pen color here. There we go. Alright, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, and all of that is over 2a. Okay, x equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill in these values. So for a, I'm going to fill in 3. Alright, so I've got x equals negative b. Well, b is negative 2, so it'll be positive 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared. That would be negative 2 squared. Negative 2 times negative 2 is positive 4. So I'll go ahead and put that in there. Oops. So my b squared right here is going to be positive 4 minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 5. So if I did 4 times 3 times 5, negative 4 times 3 times 5. I could say 5 times 4 is 20. 20 times 3 would be 60. That's going to be negative 60. So I'll go ahead and replace that with negative 60. Okay, and all that is over 2a, and a is 3, so it'll be 6. So I got x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus 60 would be negative 56 over 6. So square root of negative 56, let's see, right here, that's over 6, so that means we can, the whole thing's over 6, so we can reduce right here. We can make that be a, hang on, we have to reduce this fraction, this radical first. Okay, so if we reduce the radical, we've got square root of 56, and it's negative 56, so that'd be times the square root of negative 1, which is I, and 56 we could do 4 times, see, if we divided that by 2, we would get 28, and that would be 16, 14. Let me make sure. 4 is 16, 4 times 1 is 4, 5, yep, so it's 4 times 14. Square root of 4 times square root of 14. That we can pull out and make it be 2 times square root of 14i. Okay, so we get x equals 2 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 14i over 6. Now we can reduce right here, and that would be 1 and 3 and 1. So we're going to have x equals 1/3 plus or minus the square root of 14i. And that is the answer to that one. Alright, let's try another one like that. Solve by using the quadratic formula. Alright, so first we have to put this in the right order. So we've got x squared, and then we move that over to the other side. So minus 3x minus 28 equals 0. Alright, so our a is going to be 1, because there is no coefficient to x squared. Our b is going to be negative 3, and our c is going to be negative 28. Alright, so now we'll write the formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Alright, so now we can start filling in variables. Okay, so our negative b is 3, negative 3 would be positive 3, so we got 3 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So it'll be negative 3 times negative 3. 3 times 3 is 9, positive 9, minus, so we've got 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 28. So that means that I need to do 4 times 28. That's negative, so those cancel each other, so that'll end up being a plus. And then I do 28 times 4. 4 times 2 is 8, 9, 10, 11, 112. Okay, so does hopefully you guys understood what I did right there. I did negative 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 28. And that all comes up to positive 112. Alright, and all that is over 2a, and a is 1, so it's just over 2. Okay, so now we need 9 plus 112. 10, 11, 121, and the square root of 121 is 11. So I've got x equals 3 plus or minus 11 divided by 2. Okay, because when I added those together, I get 121, and the square root of 121 is 11. Okay, so if I did 3 plus 11, that would be 12, 13, 14 divided by 2, which equals 7. And if I did 3 minus 11 divided by 2, that would be 8, negative 8 divided by 2, which would be negative 4. So the answers are 7 and negative 4. So that's one that we could do by factoring. 7 times 4 is 28, and 7 minus 4 is 3. Yes, yes. All right, there's 2 practice problems for you to work. Go ahead and pause the video. Okay, so A says begin with ax squared bx plus c equals 0 and derive the quadratic formula. So we're going to work through that again. Just going to use black here. Okay, so I've got ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. First thing we want to do is isolate that x by dividing everything by a. So now I have x squared plus b over a times x plus c over a equals 0. Now when we complete the square, we move this term to the other side, and we get x squared plus b over a x equals negative c over a. Then we divide that one by 2 and then square it. So b over a times 1/2 would be b over 2a. And then we square it, so times b over 2a. And we get b squared over 4a squared. So we add that to both sides. So we're going to have x squared plus b over ax plus b squared over 4a squared equals b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. Okay, and then we want to be able to put those two together so we get a common denominator. So I've got b squared over 4a squared minus c over a. Okay, so to get a common denominator, I need to multiply this by 4. So here we go. And then I need to make it a squared, so multiply by another a. So then I'll have b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Okay. Let's just move the whole problem up here. All right. And then the next thing I need to do, so that would be b squared minus 4ac over 4a squared. Then up here, over here, I need to make this be a squared term, so x on that side, and then the square root of b squared 4a squared would be b over 2a, and that's always our middle one right here. We cut it in half. Okay, so now we've got that, so I'm going to write it up here. Okay, So then we square root that, and we square root that, and we're going to get x plus b over 2a equals the square root of b squared minus 4ac over the square root of that would be 2a. All right, and now I need to move this to the other side, so minus b over 2a minus b over 2a. So I'm going to have x equals, and this is our plus or minus right there, negative b, and I can combine these because my bottoms are the same here, negative b times the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And our plus or minus right there. So x equals negative b plus or minus b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And there's the quadratic formula. So you should have come up with that as the answer by following all those steps. Alright, in this one, use quadratic formula to solve. Okay, so we're going to rewrite this. 2x squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. So our a is going to be the coefficient of x squared, which is 2. Our b is going to be the coefficient of x, which would be negative 6. And then our c is 4. Okay, so we're going to write this quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Alright, so first we've got our negative b, so x equals negative b, b is 6, so that would be positive 6, plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 6 times negative 6 would be positive 36. Okay, minus 4ac, so negative 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 4. 4 is 8, 8 times 4 is 32, and that would be negative 32. Okay. Okay, and all that is over 2 times a. A is 2, so 2 times 2 is 4. Alright, so now we need to subtract in here, so that would be square root of 36 minus 32, which would be 4. And that is just 2. So we've got x equals 6 plus or minus 2 over 4. Well, 6 plus 2 would be 8 over 4, which is going to be 2. 6 minus 2 would be 4 over 4, which would equal 1. So the answers are 1 and 2. That one wasn't too difficult. And that makes it easier when you have a coefficient right here. So if we solve that the other way, we said 2x squared minus 6x plus 4 equals 0. We would have to divide everything by 2. And we'd have x squared minus 3x plus 2 equals 0. And then you could say x, and then you've got your x right there. And you would say, which two numbers can you multiply to get 2? That would be 1 and 2. And then you'd have to add them together. So we see that has to be a negative. 1 plus 2 is 3. Negative 3. Yep. Alright, so it's just a different way to do it, not factoring. Alright, that is it for lesson 71.